and welcome back. I'm Vilka.
I'm Garika, and thank you guys so much for tuning into our second podcast episode. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our first episode. You can check it out on Spotify or our YouTube channel.
Yeah, so that one was on the millennial prize problems, which are some maths problems that I deem to be very, very, very difficult to solve. And one's been solved already, and you get $1 million for each one you solve.
Yeah, so if that sounds like something that interests you, be sure to check that out. But today we're going to be talking about something that's kind of been in the news a lot recently.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about hypersonic flights, which is basically a flight that flies at Mach 5, which basically means it's 5 times speed of sound. So 1 Mach is 1 times speed of sound, 2 Machs, 2 times speed of sound. So the speed of sound is basically about 300 meters per second.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't familiar with the unit Mach, it's basically named after an Austrian physicist. And as we sort of already explained, it just states the speed of an object compared to the speed of sound.
Yeah, so a normal flight's around about 200 meters per second. And a hypersonic flight is 5 times 330, which is insanely fast.
Yeah, so as you can tell, there's kind of, you can probably fly halfway across the world in a couple of hours.
Yeah, so I think it'd take you about a day to do that now.
Yeah, definitely.
But you'd be done in a couple of hours, but they're not commercial yet. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, so like you were saying, they're not that commercial yet. So the current uses of them are mostly in missiles, I believe. Yeah,
so they're basically what countries are sort of racing to build instead of commercial flights. That's not really a priority for governments. But we'll get into that later. There is a bit there on that too.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of kind of odd companies that will kind of look at civilian flight more, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong,
yes,
just as a whole, the governments are mostly looking at
missiles. I don't really think governments are really leaning towards making hypersonic flights commercial yet.
Yeah.
They're more focusing on missiles, like you said. So regular ballistic missiles can reach hypersonic speed.
So they can reach those Mach 5 speeds.
Yes, so what they do is... Basically, a ballistic missile uses projection motion to deliver warheads. So it sort of delivers a payload from the launch site, and the target is predetermined, so it can't sort of maneuver and go somewhere else.
Yeah, but I think hypersonic missiles, what makes them more advanced is the fact that they can travel at these lower altitudes, and that makes them a bit more kind of maneuverable, so they can avoid anti-ballistic missiles.
Yes, so that's definitely a very important factor, I'd say. But moving on from the whole missile thing, that's more of a recent thing, but the first sort of research into hypersonic flights was by NASA.
And that was in the 1990s. That was ages ago.
I know, so long. It's 34 years.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is I feel like hypersonic flights has been a more recent thing.
Definitely,
because I feel like I've been seeing it a lot more in the news lately, but
I hadn't heard about it until this year as well.
Exactly, but it's been going on for ages, so that's quite interesting to think about.
But yeah, so it was basically a series of flights called the X-43. And they had various vehicles, so the X-43A, X-43B, 43C, and blah, blah, blah. They only actually built the 43A. They did plan for the others, but they were never executed. Yeah,
so the further plans were scrapped in 2013, and they were actually replaced by a program called X-51, I think.
Yes. I wonder why, if I'm honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the X-43A, they were single use, so you couldn't really reuse the plane.
Yeah.
After one experiment, but 3 of the X-43 were built.
So in regards to the X-43A, the one that was actually built,
Yes.
what kind of speeds did it get up to? Did it get up to Mach 5, or was it able to go beyond that?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. It sort of beat its own records. So, unfortunately, the first one. So the first one, it was destroyed after malfunctioning in flight in 2001.
I mean, I guess you kind of expect that. It's such a new concept at the time.
Yeah, especially in the 1990s when
Yeah.
technology wasn't as advanced as it is now.
For sure. I would definitely be a lot more surprised if it was actually able to have like a successful flight.
First try as well.
Yeah.
But like I said, there were 3. So the second one reached a speed record of Mach 5 in March 2004, which is insane. So 2 Machs above Mach 5, the speed of a hypersonic flight. So that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and what's quite interesting to see is actually later that year, in November of 2004, they broke their own record again with another flight that reached Mach 9.6. That is insane.
So what, nearly 2 times the speed of what a hypersonic flight is deemed to be.
Exactly, yeah.
So as I said, they're a single use. So what the flight is approximately about 10 seconds, and then it's followed by a 10-minute glide, and it ends by just crashing into the Pacific Ocean when the test's over.
Yeah, but I think, I'm not sure if you've already touched on this, but the intention of this was to test different kind of aspects of hypersonic flight.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really about a successful landing or anything like that. It was just kind of varying different things. And
yeah, I guess it's just they're trying to see how it works best.
Yeah.
And so just get an idea of what and how.
Yeah. So I feel like those kind of flights were probably more intended for the kind of missile and like military use. But there's actually a really interesting European startup. Do we want to talk about that a bit?
Oh, yes. So, European startup called Destinus.
Yeah.
And, well, they said that they would like to create passenger carrying hypersonic flights by 2030.
We're in 2024. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yes. So, that's 6 years away. I don't really think... I would be very surprised if it was in 2030.
Yeah.
So... This must have been written like ages ago.
Yeah.
I think we're quite far away from making hypersonic flights commercial.
But I think something that's quite kind of important to take into account is that even if they did start up hypersonic flights by, say, 2030, it would be really expensive.
Yeah.
And I think that would kind of create these inequalities between the people that can afford it and can't afford it.
Yes. Though I think that's a big concern, but also that's how commercial flights started back when.
Yeah.
But that was obviously something that the richer could afford and the middle class probably couldn't.
Yeah, so I think it will probably, before like the average middle class, like middle income person can afford to go on these flights, will be decades from now. It is not something in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, because I mean now you can go to Italy for like what, 30 quid right now.
But I mean, even though they wanted to start it in 2030, they wanted to, it was supposed to be a very small scale aircraft anyways, so I don't think they were looking for it to be a more mainstream form of transport. I think it was only supposed to hold around 25 passengers.
Right. That's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the limitation in terms of like the range, and obviously that's like going to be making it more expensive.
Yeah, so I think they kind of have admitted sort of that they will be more focused on the kind of upper class customers.
Yes.
But I think they aimed that by around 2040, they'd kind of like to scale it up and have multiple classes and make it a bit more accessible to everyone.
Yeah, so I think one of the ways that they're kind of looking to make it cheaper is by using hydrogen as fuel.
Oh, I see.
So zero emissions, and it's better for the environment.
That's a good thing, because there's obviously been a lot of talk about climate change recently.
Yeah, in the like past 5 years, there's been a big concern over climate change.
Exactly. So this is gonna kind of help to make it more appealing to the public. I can't imagine having a flight in today's age that releases a ton of carbon is going to go well with everyone.
Yes. I think, like you said, they're trying to get the middle class into hypersonic flights by 2040. What's the plan? I think one of the ways they're hoping to do that is by predicting that the hydrogen prices would drop.
Yeah.
So that's also going to make the production cost cheaper, and the tickets cheaper.
Exactly.
So that would significantly reduce it for like ultra long range flights.
Yes. So that's Destinus. They want to use hydrogen as fuel, but hypersonic flights in general, the way that they kind of work is a lot more unique and different to normal flights.
So they use oxygen from the atmosphere to combust the fuel, so that reduces the overall weight of the flight, making it cheaper.
And I think, like Destinus, the engine is primarily fueled with hydrogen, and it uses about 1 kilogram of fuel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is all good, you know. It uses oxygen from the air, reduces the weight, which is cheaper. But one of the issues is that it requires... Well, it's not really an issue, but it requires a booster jet so that it can reach the really high speeds.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of expected. I mean, it's going at 5 times the speed of sound.
Yes.
So, of course, it would
fast.
need something to kind of propel it and get it into the atmosphere.
Yes. And also another issue is that because it's really, really fast, 5 times the speed of sound is insane. It produces a lot of heat as a result of compression shock waves.
Yeah. And I also think it can be really noisy, obviously, because it's such a loud engine. So I think all of these things are kind of making it a bit less practical at the moment and a bit less safe for civilian flight, and I think that's why they're focusing more on missiles at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's what the whole... Because it's definitely loud is one of the issues they're sort of dealing with.
So how did the X-43A, how did that deal with the heat then?
The heat is so intense that it basically can melt portions of the airframe, which is disastrous. So what they do is they cycle water from behind the engine cowl and sidewall. So
to cool the surfaces.
Yes. So that itself is at Mach 3. So that is, again, 3 times the speed of sound, so 990 meters per second.
I see.
So that itself is really, really fast to keep up with the amount of heat that's produced by the hypersonic flight.
Yeah. So should we talk a bit about kind of structurally how it's designed? So I believe hypersonic flights are supposed to be really thin, kind of almost as thin as a surfboard.
Yeah, I guess it's to reduce air resistance.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's 3.7 meters long, so about 12 feet.
Yeah. And I think the way that the body is kind of designed is it allows it to get that lift for the flight.
Yes, I think that's very important. So with that, along with the booster, it helps it to reach Mach 5.
So it's not just the kind of technology of this flight, it's also the shape and design. It makes such a big impact on whether or not it can reach Mach 5.
I think it's not just about the whole engineering side of it, but also the physical side that really makes an impact.
Yeah. And coming back to Destinus, I think it sort of had a similar shape. It was kind of like a wave rider, I guess you could say.
Yes. So there are a lot of pros and cons.
So I think it's kind of important, while it seems like such a cool concept to have these hypersonic flights, it is important to look at kind of some problems that might be
so there are quite a few problems
associated
that are, again, sort of preventing hypersonic flights from becoming commercial.
Yeah.
And also why the reason that we both think that they're decades away from sort of replacing...
They've got a long way to go before they overcome some of these issues. I think one of the issues that we came across was these like high speeds can kind of cause the flight to be more sensitive to changes in flight conditions. And
so that would make turbulence a bigger issue. Much bigger issue than
it can make it a lot more like unstable.
Yes, so it's sort of... We're not really sure about the long-term impacts about hypersonic flights because, Yes, NASA tested them like 30 years ago.
That was unmanned though, so we don't know about the impacts on the body yet.
So it hasn't really been tested with someone inside the flight. And
Exactly.
Because they've always had like a predetermined target and there's no one been inside.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's someone driving it.
Yeah.
And sort of, I would assume that also flying a hypersonic flight would be different to...
For sure. Also, just thinking about normal flying already has so many effects, like, you know, dehydration, jet lag, but just medically it can also increase the risk of things like deep vein thrombosis.
Yes, so I think, again, you would not want that, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think there's just so many reasons why hypersonic flights aren't commercial yet, and they're sort of, and no one knows the effects of it.
Yeah.
Really. So they've got to test that first and find the issues, resolve the issues, and it's going to take so many years.
Yeah, and I also think we're a bit kind of unsure about, you know, the flight path and targeting, and because sometimes there can be issues with manoeuvring the flight.
Yes, I mean
because of that instability and things like that.
Yeah, so it's always been like a predetermined target, like you said.
But I mean, it's not all bad. I mean, think about hypersonic flights. Like we said, you can get halfway across the world in a couple of hours. Think about how accessible traveling will be, and just like going to certain countries. Yes, that is going to be amazing for businesses and improve globalization so much.
Also, like immigrant families.
Yeah,
they can go back and visit their countries. So I mean, I think America and India, like an hour, a whole day and a bit to get from country to country.
Exactly.
That could probably be done a few hours.
You can get and. I mean, vice versa. People can step out of the country easier for job opportunities.
It would just overall just improve globalization. Like you said, it's really good for businesses.
And not just on Earth, space as well. You can kind of use this technology to access space a lot faster.
Yes, I think that would be really cool to see, especially because NASA tested this. 35 years ago. To see NASA sort of implement hypersonic flights into space travel would be really, really interesting. Yeah.
But I think something I was quite curious about is I've seen a lot of different articles. Some of them will use the word supersonic and some of them use hypersonic. So what is the difference between both of those terms?
So a supersonic flight is a flight that travels faster than the speed of sound. But hypersonic flights are flights that travel specifically Mach 5.
Oh, so it's like a type of supersonic flight.
Supersonic flights aren't hypersonic, but hypersonic flights are supersonic.
I see.
So hypersonic is sort of like supersonics, I mean, it's like a sort of umbrella term, you could say.
Do you think supersonic commercial flying would be probably more accessible just because it could be a lower speed?
Yeah, so they actually had the commercial flight airline.
Yeah, I believe it was called Concorde, but that actually kind of retired in 2003. So
that was a while ago.
Yeah,
20 years ago. But
I mean, what do you think about the future of hypersonic flights?
So it is expected to become drastically change the way that industries and businesses operate. Yeah. Now, in articles that I've seen, it's sort of said 2035, but that's only 10 years away.
Yeah. But I think you're right. I mean, this kind of technology is going to be amazing in the way that it will revolutionize the world.
Definitely revolutionize.
And it's going to have so many positive, if we can get this right and nail it, it will have so many positive impacts.
Yeah, I think it'd be really, really great to sort of get this into more, use it more often, but obviously we're very far away from that.
But yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to kind of see where this goes. Maybe in a year's time, we should, do another episode and kind of talk about if there's been any progressions.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now, that's all we've got. So thank you guys so much for staying to the end.
And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of really cool episodes coming out for you guys. So be sure to check those out when they come.
Leave a review if you want. And follow our Instagram.
Yeah, if you've got Instagram, be sure to give us a follow at Stem Cells. You'll get some you'll get regular updates about our channel and also about our podcast. And we've also got some really cool blooper videos for you guys. So, yeah.
Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys.